to tonight's event. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben Miller, and I am the Senior Class Secretary and Treasurer. After hearing that Milo was coming tonight to speak to us, I had a long conversation after BSG Congress with members of both sides of the political spectrum to talk about tonight's event. While I understand it has the potential to be controversial, I wanted to let you know, as someone from the political left, what I hope can happen as a result of tonight's event. So Milo was brought here tonight by the Bucknell University Conservatives Club, Young Americans for Liberty, and Bucknell College Republicans. We recognize that the organizations that have chosen to bring Milo here today do so not because they're in full agreement with all of his views and opinions, but rather to create a discussion on campus. As peers in the pursuit of higher education, we pride ourselves on being intellectual individuals capable of entertaining meaningful discussion on a variety of topics. The views that are spoken here tonight may resonate with some of you or may challenge others. Many of these views are views not often heard or given their fair respect on this campus, and that is fundamentally not fair. As a university, we must be able to offer a platform for a variety of views and opinions. We expect that tonight can be used as a catalyst for the creation of meaningful discussion. We would like students from all points of the political and ideological spectra to come together in discussion so that we can become a more united campus with a shared respect and understanding that everyone has a right to their view, whether or not we agree with it. I'm hopeful that the result of these discussions will not be the creation of a further divide among students, but rather a coming together of our student body as a result of mutual respect for each other and our differences. With that, Tom, if you want to...
All right, can everybody hear me? Yep. Okay, so I first have to read that the views expressed in the upcoming presentation are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the views, opinions, or positions of Bucknell University. As such, they should not be in any way attributed to the university. Just had to get out of the way. I'd like to first thank everyone for coming out tonight. I first have to thank Ethan of the Conservatives Club, Colby of the Young Americans for Liberty, and without their help, this event would not have been possible. To briefly introduce myself, my name is Tom Sakata, and I am the president of the Bucknell College Republicans. This past week has been an incredibly interesting and transformative experience for me. While the Bucknell community's reaction to my decision to bring Milo to campus has been mixed, it has certainly been a strong reaction, evoking emotions as well as discussions that I certainly believe would have never happened otherwise. However, I think it's worth spending some time to explain my motivation for bringing Milo to campus. Now, I understand that Bucknell is a private institution, and that this allows them to take greater liberties with the restrictions that they can place on speech and curriculum. But what we're here to do tonight is to define the function and the purpose of the university. What falls under free speech and what doesn't? What is the range of allowable opinions? And in open discussions, are we ever allowed to be wrong? Just a few weeks ago, activist Niall Fort spoke on campus during Martin Luther King Week. In a book he published in 2014, Fort generally justified the use of violence by saying, quote, that under conditions of white supremacist terror, revolutionary violence can be an expression of Christian love. Presenting nonviolence as the only possible Christian response to racial terror is not only unreasonable but unrighteous. Revolutionary violence can be an expression of Christian love. There were no protests at Mr. Fort's event. No signs were torn down or defaced. And although myself and several others were aware of Mr. Fort's horrifying calls to violence prior to his lecture, we decided not to protest, knowing that it was in our best interest not to draw any further attention to the event. My correspondence with Milo Yiannopoulos began in September of 2015 when I reached out to him to vent about my experiences dealing with overwhelming political correctness here at Bucknell, and to ask him to join me for a brief interview on my weekly radio show on WVBU. Incredibly, he responded to my email in only 7 minutes with the response, "I think I should come visit." After going through all the stages of approval through the university channels, the event's date was settled for today. In the past week, and perhaps as a result of the disruptions to Milo's recent lecture at Rutgers University, campus awareness of the event increased dramatically overnight. Shortly after, I began to notice that our event posters were being ripped down, defaced, and disposed of in nearby trash cans. I began to receive a flood of emails, and I was banned and censored from a group planning a safe space discussion on an event that I planned myself. The tying theme across many of the conversations that I've had this week in opposition to the event seemed to be that ideas are dangerous, and more specifically that ideas can infringe upon student safety. In no other context would this university allow a student to be banned from a discussion about an event that he planned himself. In no other context would this university allow a student to be excluded from an event on the basis of his beliefs. If this doesn't violate the university's plan for diversity and inclusion, I'm not sure what does. One of the wisest Bucknellians on campus reminded us recently to not kid ourselves. There are no safe spaces. There is one space, and we all share it together. Milo Yiannopoulos is a journalist, a broadcaster, and a satirist who appears regularly on television and radio discussing society and media, politics, and technology. He is a senior editor at Breitbart News, a Los Angeles-based conservative news service. Milo has written extensively for The Telegraph, and his writing has appeared in The Wall Street Journal, The Times, Wired, The Observer, The Spectator, Attitude, and many other places. Milo has been called a rising star of the right by The Spectator, the pitbull of tech media by The Observer, digital media's Citizen Kane by Forbes magazine, and the ultimate troll by Fusion. I just want to say that if there's any unnecessary disruptions tonight, we'll be making a $5 contribution for each interruption to the Donald Trump campaign. And and Milo has willing to match me on that. So let's try to behave ourselves. Let's try to have a good conversation. It's my absolute pleasure. It's my great privilege to introduce to you Mr. Milo Yiannopoulos.
I think I'm live. I got this great hat, look. Make Bucknell great again. Isn't that fun? I didn't get time to go to the salon today, so I'll don this at least for a little bit. No, I won't. Thank you for having me. I'm actually going to not only match the $5 donation to the Trump campaign, but I'm going to add a $10 donation to the Yiannopoulos Privilege Grant for underprivileged white boys for every unnecessary heckle. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I will anyway. It's been a bit of a long road in some cases, getting university approval for me to come and speak, and I'm always left wondering why. What it is that is so threatening to the progressive left on American campuses about a gay man with the wrong opinions. And I've come to the conclusion that the quality of debate on the progressive left, as exemplified in academic departments up and down the country, in the pages of Vox and Gawker and BuzzFeed and Mike and all those other despicable places, has reached such intellectual lows that the only way that the left now has to interrogate arguments is on the basis of the identity of the speaker. And because, although I'm a gay man and I like dick, I don't necessarily want the federal government to take 75% of my earnings, even though, you know, gay people are supposed to believe in all of those things, that the left just doesn't really know how to argue with me. Doesn't really understand how to deal with somebody that they can't call a misogynist or a sexist or a transphobe or a racist or any of the other names that they will call all of you if you have the wrong opinions about things. They can't really do it with me and get away with it. It doesn't stick because I'm, you know, a preposterous gay man with ridiculous hair who never shuts up about black penises. They seem... You read my Twitter, you know. They seem unable to interrogate arguments and to look at facts, and instead they sort of run shrieking into safe spaces anytime a speaker appears on campus who doesn't agree with their point of view. I've come to the decision, though, that it's not necessarily the students that are the problem, although they are, of course, whining babies. It's the faculty. It is your professors. It is institutions that permit this behavior. The campus radicals of the 60s and 70s were, to their credit, great believers in free speech. They were wrong about everything, but they, to their credit, believed that people should be allowed to be offensive and people should be allowed to challenge the establishment. Their children and their children's children, the social justice warriors of the modern campus, have forgotten this. They've forgotten something interesting. They've forgotten that free speech, but more specifically offensive speech, serves two purposes. One, it keeps us safe. In those countries where people are allowed to offend the ruling classes, and in America that means the liberals who run academia, the newspapers, and university, and the entertainment industry. In countries where you're allowed to be rude about those people, we don't shoot each other over politics. In those countries in the world where you're not allowed to be rude about the ruling establishment, people do shoot each other. But there's another more ironic failure in the left's new hostility to free speech, and it's universally hostile to free speech, whether it's the Black Lives Matter movement or feminists, they're all the same. They don't want to hear it, they want to shriek, they want to yell, they want to shout you down, they want safe spaces, trigger warnings, all this nonsense. And it's that they've forgotten that free speech, and specifically offensive speech, the right to say things that people above you don't want to hear in a manner in which might offend them, is an engine of progress, but an engine specifically of progressive progress. It is what gave us gay rights and gay marriage. It is what gave women the vote. It is what brought about an end to slavery in this country. And the left has forgotten, it seems, that what got them there in the first place was the right not just to say what you want, but the right to offend people while you do it. Now, I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because I'm being escorted off campus at 8:30 because I'm too dangerous to be allowed to be here for too long. I'm not even allowed to stay on the on-campus hotel. I have been moved to somewhere near the penitentiary, which actually I was fine with. They could have saved the hotel bill. They could have just dropped me off at the front door. I would have been fine. It's always been a life ambition of mine to fuck someone on death row. It's about as hot as it gets. You have a supermax on your doorstep. It's very exciting. I've actually extended my stay by 3 days. I'm not leaving till Monday. It's true. I'm going to get straight to the Q&A because having a conversation, as I say, we're short on time because I am a threat to student safety because I am a gay man with opinions, so sorry about that. But I want to say just two things before we get into having a conversation, and you can ask me whatever you want about whatever you want. In fact, I think you already have, and we'll get through the questions. The first thing is, it's really important that you remember, as consumers, as customers of this educational establishment, what you're not getting for your money. And this isn't just specific to this university, it's specific to most of them, actually. And I was at Rutgers where people smeared themselves with red paint and yelled, "This man preaches hatred." And, you know, the students are just idiots, right? These are just dumb kids who don't know anything. But it made me wonder, what are these kids learning in class? What are they not being exposed to? Well, they're not being exposed to any point of view that challenges their prejudices. And I use the word prejudices advisedly. The problem is with the staff, with the teachers, with the faculty, who are so politically homogenous that they don't even know alternative points of view, let alone want to expose you to them. And the second thing I'll leave you with is just a recapitulation, really, of the importance of offensive speech. I don't really want to come here and talk endlessly about myself as much as I enjoy talking about myself. It is my favorite subject, as anyone who follows me on Twitter will tell you. But the way that my tour is panning out, this dangerous faggot tour, it's a good name, right? Is that actually the story of the tour is of what's happening on those tour stops, whether it's protests at Rutgers, whether it's Minnesota air horns. They went to the discount store in Minnesota, and they came with air horns, except some of them didn't work. So this guy sort of leapt up very enthusiastically, and his air horn went... He sort of looked at it sadly before being hauled out by the police. Somebody brought it up to me to sign later, and I just wrote, "In the end, I'll always be louder, darling." What I want to remind you of, the purpose of, the most interesting thing about this tour has been the tour itself, not necessarily the subject matter of any of these discussions, because I've realized just how infantilizing these institutions have become, and just how allergic to alternative points of view the progressive left now is. Anyone who asks for a trigger warning or a safe space should be immediately expelled, not rewarded by the institution at which they're studying with resources. Rutgers, a week after my talk, the university staged a group therapy session for people who weren't at my talk, but were so appalled and so threatened and so violated by the idea that I might, not agree with the tactics of modern third-wave feminism, that I might not like some feminists, that they had a group therapy session that involved the police, it involved the campus counseling services, It involved numerous members of the faculty, the student council. This stuff is nuts. This stuff is getting in the way of your education, and I would advise you to resist it at all turns. Every time you hear about this stuff, you should use the most powerful, the best weapon in any free speech fundamentalist's arsenal, and that is ridicule. These things are worthy of ridicule. They are deserving of ridicule. You're here. The purpose of your time here is to explore new ideas. The purpose of your time here is to challenge yourself. The purpose of your time here is to interrogate new ways of